I'm super excited for the viewers to meet you. Just to introduce you to everyone, you're the political cartoonist for the Washington Times.
That's correct.
Yes, you're also a husband and a father. And
that's the most important.
Exactly. But really, how did you get started with being a political cartoonist?
Well, I had a desire to use what my dad told me were gifts from God as an artist. I wanted to use them for some good purpose that I thought would be valuable while I was here.
Love it.
However long I'm here. And I had the opportunity when I was about 21 to work as an illustrator for the then newly created Washington Times newspaper in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
That's 40 years ago. That answers another one of your questions.
It is. It's
How
the next
long have I
question.
been here? It's 40 years. But it seemed to be a good marriage of my abilities and what I thought was a very important opportunity to serve the country, to draw for the sake of righteousness or whatever, those, when you're 21, that's
Noble
what you're looking
purposes.
for. Oh, yeah. So that's how it started. I'd always admired comic book artists, editorial cartoonists like Oliphant and David Lowe, Bill Malden, Herb Block, of course, and really didn't understand how exacting their particular craft was. When I first started at the Washington Times, I did illustrations generally, but I very soon gravitated toward the commentary section, which was the opinion section, which at that time, at the height of the Cold War, was a forum to present to the public, and particularly to the Washington leadership, thought in opposition or in answer to communist propaganda from the Soviet Union.
Gotcha.
So I started illustrating those pieces a lot. A lot of times I used a political cartoon as a solution because the issues were a little more subtle, a little more complicated than just a plain picture without words. Also, I was asked to do political cartooning at the very beginning of the Washington Times newspaper, about 1983.
Wow.
I did that for about 3 or 4 months, but that was really a situation where I was a pair of hands. I was doing illustrations of the lead editorial.
Wow.
So technically it's an editorial cartoon, but in the real sense it was not. Because an editorial cartoonist is supposed to bring their own vision, their own take, their own talents, in addition to what the editorial board has.
Gotcha.
So, but mine was not. I was basically an extension of whatever the editor's thought was. So it wasn't really what an editorial cartoon should be in the classic sense.
So, with what you're doing now, are you able to bring your own opinions to the table, even if they contradict maybe what the overall political view of the Washington Times is, or do you have to follow the Washington Times political views to a T?
Well, to address another question which is on your list, which was what do people not understand or maybe don't know about your work?
Yeah.
No editorial cartoon exists independent of the approval or authority of the newspaper in which it appears.
Okay.
So, I work at the Washington Times. I agree with the Washington Times in general. The direction of the founder particularly, I agree with that. And I was trying to express a certain viewpoint. Initially, that first stint, as I mentioned before, as an editorial cartoonist, really didn't go very far because I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do.
Right.
Then as a commentary art director for the section and illustrator, I was able to finesse a couple of things in there. But again, my wife always cautioned me later, your job is not to lean over, get ahead of your skis. You have to stay within the parameters of the author's piece. You can't just stick your own opinion in there, and you can't do a bad job if you don't like what he says either. You've got to give him your best whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So my duty, I felt, as an illustrator for the paper has always been just give it your best effort whether you agree or not. But with the editorial cartooning, it was about 2008. I was given an opportunity to do a full page.
Wow.
Once a week, just whatever I wanted to do. And that was really a godsend. And I did that for 18 months, every Sunday.
Cool.
Which I just happen to have a few samples over there. But that was the first opportunity to really do what I wanted to do alone. And I learned quickly that it's not so easy.
I was just going to ask, a full page is different from just one, too.
But it's not so easy to find what's important, what's valuable, what's worth doing this week. My wife and I, after church, we'd have a discussion. We'd sit in the park looking at each other, trying to think, what should we do this week? What's the issue this week? And then I had basically from Monday until Saturday, 7 o'clock, to come up with everything, execute everything, get it done.
Wow.
Very often, it's a full 40 hours. Unfortunately, those 40 hours very often came between Friday morning and Saturday evening. I would just stay up all night just trying to get, finally everything would come together and I would do it at the last second. That happened a lot.
Pressure makes diamonds.
Yeah, well, you would think so. But the coming up with the lump of coal in the first place, that was my biggest challenge. Yeah. So that happened, and then that was canceled unceremoniously in 2010. I went back to commentary, and then just recently, it'll be 5 years in July. I was informed that I was going to do editorial cartooning twice a week.
Okay.
So I started off twice a week with that, and now it's developed into 5 and 6 times a week. I'm just doing them as fast as I can. To get back to the original point, an editor is always part of the process.
Gotcha.
And so each editorial cartoonist, to whatever degree of independence they've developed, it's developed over time based on the editor's willingness to let them be free to do their work.
Gotcha.
Some situations, editors are micromanagers. They want you to fix this letter. They want this face, the nose to be shorter. They want this to be bigger. That kind of thing. And
have you experienced a lot of that?
Oh yeah. I went through I got a very good schooling right from the get-go. I worked with a fantastic editor, Wes Pruden, who's since passed away, at the beginning of this 5-year stint. And he taught me so many things about how an editorial cartoon is a different kind of animal from anything else.
Gotcha.
It has to be lean, it has to be to the point, it has to be simple to look at, so on and so forth. So I learned a lot from that. And subsequently, when he passed, another editor took over, Carol Herman, and she carried on this tradition, which sometimes had me tearing my hair out in my office, but I was always smiling and nice and contrite when I appeared to do the work. Because if something is not approved, then the paper can't stand behind it.
Gotcha.
So if Herb Block did something, and the Washington Post fundamentally disagreed with it, they wouldn't stand behind him if someone complained. So there is some kind of checking out process that goes on. 2 heads are better than one. Sometimes some cartoonist comes up with what he thinks is the funniest joke that was ever conceived, and nobody else gets it, then it doesn't go in the paper.
Gotcha.
It's not funny if somebody else doesn't get it, So the editor is there to get it, and if the editor doesn't get it, then
revise.
I put it back in the oven, cook it a little longer.
Yeah.
Something has to be changed about it. My wife, again, tells me, says, don't throw anything away. Just stick it up on the wall of shame and wait. And in a few months' time, you might see that idea for what it's supposed to be. It'll have its proper time.
That's words of wisdom. I love it.
And it's happened a half a dozen times where something has come off the wall after a few months, been revised a wee bit, resubmitted, and it got passed.
That's great. I love it. You have a very wise wife with you.
Yes, I do.
So has your political views changed over the years as you've been working with the Washington Times? Or
When I started, I was 21 and single and zealous and excited. Anybody who's ever heard the term baby Christian will probably understand the tonality of my mind at that time. Since that time, I've been married. I have 5 children. And so I would hope I'm not as naive as I used to be.
Learned a lot.
Nor as judgmental, nor as callous. because looking back on those earlier days, politically there was a war going on, and I had a wartime mentality. But once the Soviet Union fell, the war shifted to inside. And like Mark Twain said, the line between good and evil runs right down the middle.
Sure does.
So the idea that you might have to reflect and repent and change and control yourself in order to make the world a better place became a lot clearer. The distraction of the enemy outside no longer was there.
Gotcha.
So the last few decades, it seems like that says a long time, but it's taken me a long time to learn. But as a parent, I have more compassion. I realize you can't just snap your fingers and have things change. It takes time, it takes perseverance, patience, and it's helped me over the years. Politics is just persuading people. But the politician who doesn't have a lobbyist is God, in my estimation. Because God is asking and showing, asking people and showing people all the time a way of life that is loving, is best, and yet people are distracting themselves and denying that and wasting time. So I'm learning to focus more on that. How can my cartoons bring that point out?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm definitely gonna have to ponder that concept later.
But where politics encourages that, I'm for it. Where politics is a distraction from that original realization of our identity as human beings, I have no use for it anymore. I'm not so impressed by all the gamesmanship and all that other business.
Yeah.
It was impressive at one time until I got close to it. It's like this movie star is tremendous until you live with the guy. Then you realize he's got to use the bathroom like everybody else, and it's not as glorious as he thought.
Very interesting. Well, that definitely sheds a lot of light onto what your career has been, or for people like me who know absolutely nothing about it, they definitely can have a better view of what that career might be. But before we close out, what's some of the best parts of your career? I've heard a lot of many good things, but are you able to narrow it down to
Yeah, I thought about
a
that.
few things?
Between you and me, she sent me the questions days ago so I could figure this out and look spontaneous in answering this question. I thought, the aspiration of anybody who thinks they're trying to make a point is if, like Jesus said, love your enemy. If your enemy loves you, he's no longer your enemy. So the couple of times when I have received awards or recognition from the so-called other side was very important. More important to me than anything. More important to me than any plaudits or praise from my own tribe is to have recognition from the other guys. So when I did the big picture, it was called Hunter's Big Picture, that page I talked about earlier. That won the Scripps Howard Award for Best Editorial Cartoon in the country.
Wow.
In 2009. Ironically, it was canceled. Just months before us getting that news, it was canceled. But that was important to me because the Scripps Howard organization is not a partisan organization.
Okay.
And they were looking at straightforward excellence, interest, or whatever. In the judges, the panel, the people who liked the cartoons were not of my political persuasion or at all. And yet, it was recognized. And so that was a very precious award for me.
I'd say so.
To get. And then sometime later, when the editorial cartoons started, about the second or third year of doing those, we got a Sigma Delta Chi award for just editorial cartoons, completely different format. Again, same point. This was about journalistic excellence, and so to whatever degree you can say objectivity still remains in the journalism world, they were looking for straightforward, superior quality. And for the cartoons to be recognized, between you and me, the Washington Times as an organization has not been warmly received by the traditional media, the existing media, even after 40 years. They have some kind of a concept about the Times that precludes them from having objective judgment.
Interesting.
To put it mildly, I'm
Yeah.
trying to be diplomatic here. But so for a cartoonist who's supposed to be, representing the spear point of the ideology
Yeah.
that they detest so much, for that cartoonist to be recognized, I think is a pretty good thing.
I'd say so.
So
Absolutely.
those would be the two professional highlights. And the third one, like it or not, I got to say, working with Wes Pruden for 3 years was the most important professional opportunity I had, because this was someone who had incredible wisdom, a range of experience, standing, authority, and taste. And so I was working with him and learning how to do editorial cartooning from him as the editor for the section. He wrote the editorials. He was in charge of the entire section. So behind the scenes, I would say that was important. I really needed that.
Yeah.
Even in my 50s, I still needed that education because editorial cartooning itself is a very rare art form. There's the dwindling numbers of people who even have the opportunity anymore.
That's one of the reasons why I was asking, what do people not know about this? Because it's such a smaller atmosphere, or sphere, I should say, of art that most people don't know a lot about. So
I would say the thing to remember is it's collaborative.
I like
And
it.
I, as a young man, I wasn't good at collaborating. I did not want to work with anyone else. But as a married man, I had to learn the hard way to be part of a couple. And that, there's victory in we, and there's despair in I. I'm finding that out. So virtually everything that worked in my life has had to do with collaboration. Yeah, it ain't me, it's us.
Well, thanks for collaborating with us today.
Perfect segue.
Yes. So I always like to keep the interviews shorter for my viewers, but
Sure.
I think this has been a really great opportunity.
So this
for
is the
them
first
to
in the
see it.
series.
No, not quite. I think you're number 11, but.
No, just me. I mean, like 4 or 5.
Oh yeah. You want sequels?
Sure. The audience
we
will
want-
demand it. They will. They'll be.
We can do painting. We can do the Asian art you were telling us about.
They're out there frantically typing away right now. Bring him back. He's so good.
If they demand it, I will meet their demands. So, Alec, where can the viewers find you, and how can they contact you?
Well, the cartoon runs 5 days a week in the Washington Times. It is available to view on the Washington Times website, which is washingtontimes.com. And it's still free. No paywall for the cartoons. When they go on on the home page, there's a red bar across the top of the screen with different categories, and one is opinion.
Okay.
And you scroll down opinion, you'll see cartoons. You open that up, and then you scroll down further, and you'll see Best of Alexander Hunter.
Perfect.
And you can look at 650 cartoons without commercial interruption. It's great.
I love it.
So it's fantastic.
Yeah, I was scrolling through them the other day. I said, Tyler, I think you'd really like these.
Well, they're in color. That's another thing that's happened recently, and that because our newspaper had that capacity, most editorial cartoons are in color anyway, online or in newspapers. So we're able to print them both,
Awesome.
color and run them in color. And the nice thing is they're a little bit bigger on the computer.
On a computer.
Yeah, unless you're looking at your phone, then you can't.
Then you need a magnifying glass.
Exactly.
Well, I will put your email in there also for people to contact you, when they start
Hunter at
getting...
WashingtonTimes.com. Sorry.
You got it. I'll put it right up on the video, so when they get demanding, be sure to pass that along to you.
Okay.
But thank you again for being on here. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thanks for having me.
Yeah.